Hey, mom friends, welcome back to the Simple Motherhood podcast. Today, I'm doing a little bonus episode as I prep and get ready for baby things with my baby number two. We are rolling in at about 36 and a half weeks pregnant now. I thought I'd share a little bit about what this pregnancy has looked like for me, what I'm doing differently this time around with this baby, and what I learned from my first experience during that late pregnancy and early postpartum period. So, hoping it can be beneficial to some of you who are having your next baby soon, or maybe your first baby soon, and just looking to kind of simplify everything that you've heard. If you're stressed out or overwhelmed, just really starting off with some basics here. So, there's always going to be practical things that you need, like, installing a baby monitor or prepping your food ahead of time or packing your bags and organizing baby clothes and all of those great things. How everything just feels a lot more exhausting and overwhelming. Number one, just during that last month in general. But number two, when you have other children that you also need to take care of, it can be even more stressful and even more time consuming and easy to procrastinate because you're just so much busier. Personally, I'm having a hard time learning to balance all of this while having a toddler because I'm trying to soak up these last moments with him as our only child, which makes me emotional to think about. And then, I have all this excitement about this new baby coming in, and then this anxiety of getting this big wave of the last things checked off too. So, this episode, we're going to again try to simplify things, bring that stress level down, make you feel more confident, make you feel like you're not going through this last stage alone. So, let's get into it. So, starting off strong, the biggest lesson that I learned from my first pregnancy was honestly just about taking care of myself. And that sounds kind of silly, but I don't just mean physically, I mean mentally, emotionally, spiritually. During my first pregnancy, I really fell into the mindset of like, well, my body knows what to do. I'm growing a baby and it'll just kind of take care of everything. I almost was like viewing myself as just a place the baby was growing in instead of realizing and taking power in my body can change and what I do makes a difference every day for, the health of myself and the baby. So I didn't really put that much intentional effort into caring for myself outside of the basics. I took the prenatal and I like walked around and still tried to do stretches and things like that, but I didn't really put a lot of time and effort into what else I could be doing in a really well-rounded way. So looking back now, I can honestly say that that was probably my biggest regret from my first pregnancy and postpartum experience. I wasn't taking care of my mental health. I wasn't very disciplined with food or movement. I was just kind of like, yeah, like I'm just gonna treat myself to extra snacks and treats, which became way more frequent than they should have been. I took rest to a whole nother level, which I ended up not being that active at all. I wasn't intentionally like leaning to God or trying to invite Him into my experience during that time. I was just kind of self reliant, which is really lonely and sad. I realized how much power there really is in caring for yourself in a well rounded way, and not in a pressure filled or perfectionistic way, but in a loving, intentional, doing what's best for you and your body way. So this time I've been trying to move my body more consistently, whether that's going to the gym or simply being active because now I'm chasing my toddler all day. Personally, I like walking a lot and doing some light strength training, but for somebody else, that might be, doing a yoga class or swimming or some other type of movement. I've also been more mindful about what I'm eating every day. We didn't like completely change our diet around, but I think the quality of what we're getting is a lot better this time. We're really diving into, those ingredients and where they're coming from, where our meat is sourced from, things like that to just make sure that even simple meals or easy meals can still be like nourishing or better for me than they once were. Same with desserts, if I like used to eat a bunch of cookies or ice cream. There's definitely some healthier alternatives for that now, or just different choices for dessert in general. And then being super consistent with a lot of protein and a lot of water. Like my doctor said, I should be drinking a gallon of water plus per day. You always think you're drinking enough water and you're not. And also drinking a lot of the water earlier in the day so you don't have to pee a million times overnight. And protein, the one rule that I've heard is eating 3 or 4 what you would imagine as fistfuls of protein per day. So think of it like one per meal, and then, some other snacks broken up throughout the day to meet that fourth fistful amount. I think it's like one fistful equals 20 or 25 grams of protein. So you're really trying to like make it around that 100-gram mark is like the general recommendation. Of course, it can vary for everybody, but that's what I've been trying to go off of. Emotionally and mentally, I've been more aware of slowing down when I need to, protecting my peace, setting up boundaries with people that I need to, and paying attention to just how I'm feeling instead of just pushing through everything. And spiritually, I've also been strengthening my relationship with God just over the last few years in general. So naturally, He's been woven into this pregnancy a lot more than my first pregnancy. So I've been leaning to him a lot more, praying about things, having a relationship with him this time around. And it truly just feels so much more comforting and relaxing and not isolating. So that's been really wonderful. I don't have to carry everything myself. That's probably been one of the biggest differences of all, is just growing spiritually and, really developing that relationship to prepare for this beautiful moment that's about to happen and really thanking God for everything. I think sometimes as moms, we can get so consumed with preparing for this baby, in all of the materialistic ways. Like we have to pick out the nursery theme and, well, how are you going to organize your dresser and your baby caddy and your car and all this stuff? And we can forget about how to prepare and care for ourselves too during the whole entire process. But you matter in this process too. Your health matters, your emotional state matters, your relationship with God matters, your peace matters. And I believe that when we care for ourselves well during pregnancy, it changes the experience so much more than we realize. So that was the first thing, taking care of yourself in all of those ways, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. Moving on to the second tip, another thing I learned the first time around was how important it was or is to filter advice and only hold on to what actually works for you and your family. So I think a lot of people mean well when they give advice, to pregnant women or new moms. But sometimes the constant opinions and the recommendations and the must haves and the do this or not that can be really overwhelming, or it was for me at least. Before I even had my son, I felt like I was already drowning in information. Everyone had strong opinions about sleep and feeding and routines and products, schedules, toys, parenting styles. I could go on and on. And when you're a first time mom, it's easy to feel like everyone else must know better than you because you've never done it before. So, of course, you're going to, trust whatever they say and take note of everything in your head. And it's just a lot. So I think every family is different. Every mom is different. Every baby is different. And some families will thrive with minimalism and very little stuff, while other families and moms love having every single gadget and every single must have, and they can afford that too, which is great. You just prioritize different things and, things look different. So none of those things or advice given is automatically right or wrong. I think what matters most is just figuring out what actually aligns with your family and what your values are before all of the outside noise becomes too loud. So one way to do that is you can take into account what your space looks like, what your budget looks like, what your daily schedule and your daily routine looks like, what kind of person you are, if you are super organized or kind of more laid back and a little bit, okay with more chaos or mess, how much stuff you're going to be okay with buying or getting after the baby comes. There's a lot of different things to take into consideration, but I think if we spend some time with ourselves just before the baby comes and maybe our husband, it's going to be pretty easy to figure out what advice to take and leave at the door. This time around, with this second baby, you obviously need less stuff because you already have all the things from your first baby. So I'm not feeling that initial pressure to kind of like buy everything or follow every piece of advice. I'm focusing more on what kind of environment I want postpartum to feel like instead of trying to control every situation that the baby might be going through. So for me, that looks like creating a very peaceful home environment, lowering the expectations for what the baby's temperament might be like, prioritizing rest and making sure that we have all the things that are comfortable to us in our bedroom and a comfortable areas that we like to hang out in, protecting our family time, and just making sure that we can set up some good, fun things to do without trying to overcomplicate everything. So, for example, that would look like making a lot of good, comforting meals. So, we have that. That would look like setting up a really cozy postpartum cart because I know that I'm going to want all of my good snacks and things right next to me. Think through what support would make you feel good instead of overwhelmed is really a good tool to have. So the third thing that I learned and kind of learned the hard way is being much more intentional about the kind of support we're going to have after birth. I think that a lot of people genuinely want to help new moms, but sometimes we don't even know how to ask for help or be specific in what we need because we feel bad or we don't know or we just want to take, any act of kindness in, which is coming from a good place from our point of view. But after having my first son, I realized that I had a really hard time being honest about what support would have helped me the most. And I didn't want to inconvenience anyone. And I wanted to prove to myself for some reason that I could do everything on my own. That's not really possible. The postpartum period, especially the first couple weeks, is vulnerable and exhausting. And trying to do it all yourself is just going to lead to burnout. So, along with knowing what kind of support you need, setting kind and loving boundaries during that postpartum period is really important to make sure that you can get what you need for you and your family and your baby. You don't need a giant list of rules or a crazy text or anything like that, but you're allowed to communicate your needs just like anybody else. And if certain relationships or expectations from other people are adding stress during your postpartum experience, especially those early weeks, it's definitely okay to create a little space there to protect your peace and just remain, as stress free and happy as you can. At the same time, I think it's important to remember that most people really are trying their best to love and support us, even if they don't know how. So we kind of have to balance that with both grace and honesty. There's no wrong answer about food. A meal, coffee, snacks, groceries, those things can mean so much because everybody needs them. You must like something. You must like some type of dinner or lunch. You can't go wrong with that. And personally, after having my son, I didn't realize that I didn't really want longer visits or really any visits during the first month or so or pressure to host people right away. And I appreciated everyone's, love and support so much. But what would have made me the most happy was probably just someone dropping off food or like comfy pajamas or coffee and letting me rest and like not expecting anything of me or not expecting to meet the baby. For someone else, maybe that's not what they would want. Maybe they want company and conversation and support, and neither one is wrong. I just think that setting those boundaries and making sure that you know what you want to ask for this time and you know how to communicate it kindly and gracefully, still appreciate, the help, but just make use of everyone. If people know what to expect and that's really going to help you, that's going to be a total game changer than, 10 people doing the same thing that you don't really care for. So, lastly, and probably one of the biggest practical changes I made this pregnancy was switching care providers. Again, not saying one approach is right or wrong for anybody, But for me personally, finding a provider who aligned more with my values and what I had wanted for my second birth completely changed my experience this time around. During my first pregnancy, I honestly just went with whoever I was assigned to, and I never really considered that I had options or I could like interview care providers and see who was best for me. And this time I spent more time researching and asking myself what kind of provider I was looking for. And I wanted someone who would make me feel supported and informed, cared for in the way that I was looking for. And again, just aligned with a lot of those values that I had. So my experience this time and so far has been so different and so wonderful. My appointments are longer and more personal. We talk through everything really thoroughly, and I never feel rushed or dismissed. And we look at my health overall from a more comprehensive viewpoint instead of just checking boxes. And I just simply feel more at peace. So, again, just doing what's best for you, making sure you do your research and you don't stop learning and just don't like assume anything that, oh, yeah, this will be fine or this person's fine. Like the birth of your child is, one of the most, if not the most important event of your life. And you really want to make sure that people, the team, and the person delivering your baby, that you love them. And they're the best team for you. So, anyways, I think that's really the whole theme of this episode, honestly, just being intentional instead of just going through the motions, slowing down enough to ask yourself, what actually matters to you, what kind of pregnancy experience you want, what kind of postpartum environment you want, what support you want, what kind of things bring you peace and joy, and what helps you feel closer to God instead of more overwhelmed or pressured. Pregnancy and postpartum are, such vulnerable and tender seasons of your life. And I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to try to do everything perfectly that we forget we're allowed to simplify things and just start with the basics. We're allowed to protect our peace and change our minds and grow and do things differently the second time around. So that is a little glimpse into what I've learned the second time around. And we are really excited to hopefully have a couple more episodes before this baby is born. Like I mentioned, we are 36 and a half weeks now. So I'm trying to, learn everything that I can and keep on improving myself and this experience without getting too overwhelmed, just balancing everything with grace. Overall, I feel really grateful, grateful for another baby, grateful for a healthier pregnancy this time around, for another chance to experience motherhood in a different way and how much God has, blessed us so far and has grown with me through this process. If you are currently in late pregnancy or preparing, I hope this episode reminded you to take care of yourself a little bit more intentionally. So that is it. Thank you guys so much for listening. We will see you next week.